Good afternoon. My name is Stephanie Champy, and I am one of the student coordinators for this year's Education, Teaching, and Policy panel. My co-coordinator, Elisa, could not be here today, but on both of our behalves, I would like to welcome all of you and thank you all for attending. Most importantly, I would like to give a warm welcome to our panelists and thank them for being here today with us. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists and our moderator. Mr. Max Marchitello graduated from the college in 2008 with a degree in English literature. He then moved to Philadelphia and was a high school English teacher and basketball coach in North Philadelphia. Mr. Marchitello currently works at the Center for American Progress, a DC-based think tank. His work focuses on school finance, accountability, standards, and issues related to low-income students and students of color. With a career path that has included a variety of positions in both education and law, Ms. Jeannie Novichevsky serves as Executive Director and Senior Advisor for the Illinois State Charter School Commission, which she founded in 2011 to help investigate charter proposal appeals from across the state of Illinois to support and develop the evaluation of the 4 charter schools for which the commission as an authorizer. Mr. Aaron Talley graduated from the college in 2013 with a degree in English and continued on to get his master's in teaching from the Urban Teacher Education Program, UTEP, in 2014. Mr. Talley is now enjoying his first year of teaching 3rd grade on the south side of Chicago, where he teaches all subjects. Additionally, Mr. Talley is involved in community organizing with the Black Youth Project 100, an activist member-based organization of Black 18 to 35-year-olds dedicated to creating justice and freedom for all Black people through transformative leadership development, nonviolent direct action organizing, advocacy, and education. Ms. Candace Wang is the Chief Operating Officer for Capital Preparatory Schools, a charter management organization opening 2 schools in the next 2 years. Ms. Wang is responsible for establishing and maintaining the infrastructure of the organization. Previously, Ms. Wang worked at the New York City Department of Education as Chief of Staff for the Office of Academics, where she managed strategic planning and implementation of citywide instructional initiatives across 5 offices and 300 team members. And our moderator. After serving for 9 years as principal of Noble Street Charter High School, Bill Olsen returned to Hyde Park to act as senior director of the University of Chicago's Urban Education Institute. He graduated from the college in 1995 and then taught for 10 years in Chicago high schools. And now I'm going to turn it over to our moderator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. And just let's start off, give yourself a round of applause, please. Ladies and gentlemen, you are at the best panel, and it's possible that you are the best people here because you have decided to be thinking about and really thinking about and understanding education and learning in our country. And they didn't have a panel called like Rebels or Change Makers. This is that panel. And so just, once more, give yourselves a little round of applause. Like seriously, we're gonna hear from everybody on how they decided to be part of this most important work. Let's start with Aaron and just go down the row.
Okay. Hi everybody. Y'all look nice, y'all look good. So I'm originally from Detroit, Michigan. Detroit. I feel like I always have to say that. Growing up, I was low income, Black, and I was a very successful student myself, so I always feel like I just always wanted to be a teacher. And I also love writing as well, so that I felt like at the time that, teaching, they have so much time. They could write as well as be teachers. So I came to USC, and I did a lot of, neighborhood schools program and other social justice related programs that deal with teaching. My senior year rolled around, and I discovered that I wanted to take a break before later moving on to grad school, but I didn't want to go like the sort of like TFA route. And so that's when I found out about UTEP, which was just this really great program that was really, really about understanding what it means to teach students who come from urban environments. And you were able to do it. I was able to do it my senior year, which is why I just graduated in 2013 from the college and then graduated in 2014. And so now I'm currently teaching on the South Side with 25 amazing 3rd graders.
Yeah. Hi, glad to be here from DC. It's my first time back in Chicago since graduating, so I appreciate the invitation. And the story I usually tell for why I wanted to get into education is, the cheesy one you tell the interviewers, and it's kind of, but when you kind of think about it, it is kind of the reason why you would do it, is that my high school French teacher, who I was in all the way through French 5, which they didn't offer in Texas, which meant you got to hang out in the French room. And I was coming up there in summer school beforehand because I was working on the newspaper, and she was doing something with like different classroom procedures and so on. And I asked her why she was bothering, and she said, because I don't want my kids to end up like you. So it's one of those good moments where you realize the kind of, while you might make good grades and things like that, there's a lot of other elements that go into being a student, that go into having a relationship with your teacher and so on. And I wanted to be able to provide that to kids who I feel don't get that sort of thing. And it's not feel like it, they just don't, right? And so I moved into education. I took the, not TFA route, but the TNTP, the New Teacher Project route, and taught in North Philadelphia for a couple of years. Got a master's in education at the same time, did basketball, became disillusioned immediately, very quickly, thought I wanted to go to law school, decided I didn't want to do that, kind of tried different routes, and eventually after earning a master's in policy from UPenn, transitioned to DC with the idea that although all the action is predominantly at the state level, and as you get more and more local and more things are really happening, more and more of the consequential decisions are happening, I kind of feel as though the framework in which those decisions are made is usually established at the federal level, and the additional money that should be targeted to low-income students comes from the federal level. I think it's debatable, but education might be the only fundamental right that we leave up entirely to the states to execute, and that's a tragedy. And so when I worked at the Civil Rights Organization, the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, for about 3 years almost, we worked long and hard to kind of advance that agenda, that this is a civil and human rights problem, and that the needs of students with disabilities, students of color, low-income students, and so on, LGBT, English learners, the list kind of goes on, should be at the forefront of the education discussion that we're having. And then I transitioned to the Center for American Progress, in part because I wanted to do a little bit more writing. Most of my work prior was focused on lobbying the administration and Capitol Hill around issues that were important to our members. So a big transition is working in coalition. We had about, you could argue, 60 million people who we were representing and their interests at CAP. I don't have that. We fight for what we think to be like the best policy solutions to the problems that we're confronted. So that's kind of how I got to where I am now.
Hi everyone, my name is Candace Wang. I grew up in Lincoln, Nebraska and went to public schools all my life and thought that public schools were all great. And I came to the University of Chicago and started tutoring on the South Side with the Neighborhood Schools program. And that's when I realized that all public schools are not great, and actually the vast majority are not. So that's how I became really interested in education, and I knew that I wanted to go the path of many of my colleagues up here of changing that. And so I did go the TFA route. I joined Teach for America and taught high school math in Brooklyn for 2 years. And I felt that was so important because I wanted to know what teachers were experiencing in the classroom so that I could go and look at the higher scale, higher level of things and try and change things there too. So after my 2 years, I went to the New York City Department of Education, and I worked in communications for a while, and then transitioned to my role as Chief of Staff for the Office of Academics. And in that time was when Common Core standards were coming to light, and so worked on the implementation of Common Core standards in New York City classrooms. We have 1.1 million students in New York City, and that's the size of the state of Nebraska. So that was a big, different scale for me. So I got to work on a different scale with 1,700 schools, and that was also during the time when we were really pushing college and career readiness. So worked at the DOE for about 5 years, and I just recently transitioned to my new role with a charter management organization, and we're setting up 2 schools for 2015, and like I was mentioned in my bio, I'm just setting up infrastructure. I'm on day 4 of my new job, so.
Good afternoon, my name's Jeannie Novichevsky, and I practiced law for 10 years at a big law firm here in Chicago after graduating from the law school of the University of Chicago and the college. And all the time I practiced law, I really tried to do things that were fighting for civil rights and social justice, and I saw a lot of impact that poor education was having in our criminal justice and in all of our society. And so at a certain point, I decided to take a huge pay cut and go to a not-for-profit organization here in Chicago that helped to start new schools. And this was right at the time when charter schools were starting in the nation. They started first in the state of Minnesota and then came to Illinois. And there was something really appealing about the charter school idea to me, and I think it's partly a U of C thing too. Bill said this was the rebels group. So charters are inherently like, anti-bureaucracy, anti-expertise in a way, because what they're saying is that public schools don't have to be run by a monopoly. There's no reason why public schools should be monopolistic and that only one group has the expertise to deliver great education, and that in fact some people feel like a little competition would be a good stimulation to improvement of public schools overall. So there was something in me, probably the combative lawyer element, that was attracted to charter schools as kind of the startup. I mean, charter schools essentially picked a fight, if you will, with the traditional public school system and said, no, actually, you aren't doing it as good as you should. Not that there aren't a million great things to say about regular traditional public schools, and if I have a chance, I'll say them. So anyway, in my career, what I've been lucky enough to be able to do, and two things I wanted to say is that one of the things I did when I left the active practice of law is I helped to start a single-gender charter school here in Chicago, all-girls school, and that was, again, had its critics, but it opened, and it's a great example of providing education to young women. And the other thing that I helped the CEO of the Chicago Public Schools do when he was CEO, and that's Secretary of Education Duncan, he was one of the first administrators to ever say, I'm going to close down schools that are not working well, and I'm going to give the buildings to charter schools, entities not run by the monopoly, if I can just use that word. And that was historic, and I'm glad that I was a part of that, and we can discuss that more later if you want to, but those are, I guess I would want to say in closing that until it doesn't matter what your income is, or your skin color, or even your gender, in terms of predicting whether you'll graduate from high school or college, until then, I'm a supporter of charter schools and other efforts to shake up our public schools in America and make them better.
In college, I was an exotic dancer, and then wait, that's not true.
No,
that's not true. Sorry, I was getting confused. When I was I was in sort of your situation, except back in my day, we didn't have all this cool stuff where you get to come and talk. And I went to, it's okay, you can stop imagining me as a exotic dancer now, it's fine. But I went to a panel because there were burritos there, and they were delicious. And at that panel, there were some folks. They were from Marvia's. Back when Marvia's wasn't in Hyde Park, it was down in back of the yards. You guys know, right? Marvia's. Yeah. So I'm eating the burrito and I'm watching this amazing panel, and there were some charter schools or public schools. So there were some charter public school folks speaking, and some folks speaking about traditional teaching in a traditional environment. And I thought back to Maggie and Larry, who were my teachers in high school. And I was a third year at the time. And raise your hand if you're here at the University of Chicago, and you can point back to one or two teachers who just changed your life, right? And I'm so thankful for them. And I also had interned and was thinking about the political route. I had interned in DC, and I'm like, oh, man, I can't do this. Like even the congresswoman I'm working for is making, like, she's just like a machine, like she's in the machine. I don't want to be in the machine. Like, I want to be, you know, I want to be helpful to people. And so the one thing that maybe is happening with you all, or maybe not, is I definitely had folks in my life, coming from Montana, and who said, like, oh, well, why'd you go to University of Chicago if you're just going to be a teacher, right? Do you have anybody like that in their life, right? Like, oh, why are you thinking about, don't go to that panel, that's a loser panel, right? Like, you know, because it's actually the rebel panel, right? Because the thing is, you all are not going to be just anything. Y'all are going to lead. And so the folks up here on this panel are leading and have led important changes. And leading in a classroom is important leadership. It's huge. And so we can talk about that. So I just want to throw that out there. How I got into it, the woman who I was dating at the time, her twin sister's ex-boyfriend had volunteered at a Catholic school on the Southwest side. That was my job connection. And so I went and worked at that school for a little while, and then I ended up teaching for 10 years. Then I was asked to be the principal of a school, a charter public school, Noble Street. I was a principal for 9 years, and I loved it. So I have over 150 students who I got to teach and be part of their lives who have college degrees now. And I'm also just as proud of the kids who, the young people now and young adults who maybe didn't choose to go to college, but they're changing the world in other important ways because they got to be part of a learning community that was vibrant and important to them. And I've also, so that piece, just so grateful and thankful. So I was thankful for that panel, and I'm, humbly happy to say that this panel will change your life too. Or not. It's up to you. So let's, I do have a button for the first person who will ask a question. So we'll take a question and you can have a button. And then and this is from the University of Chicago Charter Schools. Now I direct the 5 charter campuses at University of Chicago and also the teacher training program. So who has a good first question? And say your name, please.
Hi, my name is Sindhu and I'm a third year at the university.
Okay, be careful, Sindhu. I'm not gonna, Look at that. Hey, come on, Canel. I hook her up. Nice work, Sindhu. Hands, who else shares that question? Like, is interested, where do you start? Okay. So let's just do, and then you're going to get different with this, you're going to get different advice here. So get ready to just have your brains go, like, I didn't know where to start, and then 4 people told me 5 different things, right? So get ready for that to happen. But why don't we start in Jeannie's end and head this way? Where to start?
I would say getting your hands around or dirty in the real work is the best thing to do. So if you can be a teacher and you want to ultimately go into education policy work or education leadership, I would recommend that. On the other hand, not everybody is going to be a good teacher. I mean, I just want to say that out loud. Like, you have to really love kids. You have to love kids more than your subject. You know what I mean? You're not really a history teacher. You're a teacher of, as Bill said, 100 kids. And it's great if you go home and watch the History Channel, which isn't really the highest level of history, but, you got to really get energy from kids. You got to be the type of person who thrives on human exchange as a way of generating energy, and not everybody does. So I guess I'll stop there and say, I advise to teach if you think you're that kind of person.
So I agree with you. I think that the best place to start is in schools. I would add that you don't, like you said, not everybody can be a good teacher. Not everybody gets energy from the classroom, but I think that the most important thing is to get in a school. So if that means that you really want to go to law school right after college, go to law school, but make sure that you're in a school during that time. So I think just making sure that you understand the day-to-day of what it's like to be a teacher, what it's like to be in a school, so that you can understand later on when you are looking, if you are looking to look at the, the larger scale things, that you can say, well, this teacher that I talked to or this teacher that I was is having this experience, and this is what I want to change for the students.
Not to contradict the moderator, but I think you might get the same thing from everybody. where you end up has often nothing to do with where you started. But in DC, with all the tables I sit at around who are making the decisions about policies that will impact teachers across the country, more importantly, the students across the country, most of them have not been in a classroom, and certainly not a classroom that is serving disadvantaged communities. So I would recommend, for your credibility, to increase your perspective, to be able to make more intelligent policy recommendations that are at least grounded or at least related to what happens in the classroom, I would argue, unless you are certain you will be terrible at it, roll up your sleeves and do the 80-hour weeks, because I've had a lot of different jobs and teaching has by far been the hardest.
I mean, I would just add, let's challenge what it means to be a good teacher and a bad teacher. No one's going to start off being amazing. I personally was always sort of resentful of my friends who were like, oh, I really want to be in education and I want to make an impact. I don't want to teach though. It's just something about. So that's not like, if you really feel like teaching isn't for you, of course, then don't do it. But I would say if you are not going into being a teacher because you're still sort of hung up on the sort of like social idea of I'll be just a teacher, then I say do your best to sort of like challenge that and get rid of that. Like, it's my first year. Like, I can't say it's been all, rainbows and roses, So I love the idea of like, just love kids, because it's, you might go in there like, I'm going to make a difference. And then you're like, okay, wait a minute. This isn't about me anymore. But I would say, like, I love how, like, just intellectually rigorous it is I want to say, I mean, I haven't had all the career experience, but I want to say, like, I feel like there's just nothing like doing it. Like, just the fact that you have to come in there and you have to be on, and all the decisions you have to make. I teach, 8-year-olds. Just the decisions you're making in, like, a 5-minute time span, it can be really, really rewarding, and it can be really, really amazing, and it can also be really, really difficult. So definitely just keep getting as much experience as you can. And just, I wouldn't say don't beat yourself up for whatever decision you make, but, I say shoot for teaching, try it, if nothing else.
Yeah, what a great panel. I would say, like, I would just, if I can try to, like, go off of something that you just said, Aaron. So after you've made the decision, don't beat yourself up. But before you make the decision, you should really beat yourself up, right? Like, you should really be thinking deeply. This is a wonderful time for you to be really soul-searching and thinking about what role you want to play. And I love the idea, like, that you shouldn't be, don't accept, like, this sort of societal thing of, that's kind of why I want, you're just a teacher, if that's a piece of it. Just to get a sense of where we are with the audience, if I could, if all of you, who is considering classroom teaching? Like, hey, I think I might want to do that, okay? And who's thinking, eventually I do want to do some kind of policy work, eventually, right? Or who's thinking, eventually I want to do some kind of school leadership work, right? Okay. And then let me just get a couple other kind of, like, temperature questions. Who just loves the kind of learning and academic side, and you don't care which, like, it doesn't matter which kids, you could teach any kids anywhere, like, who just loves learning and like wants it to be part of education generally, or higher education? Okay, less so? Yeah, some maybe. Yeah, that's fine. And there's no wrong answers here, guys. There's no book to go back to. Oh, well, Weber says. Well, it's like, no, Weber didn't talk about this one. Who's pretty interested in this idea of education as a way to give equal opportunity to people in our country? Okay, and that's certainly what you're hearing a theme here. All of those are good, and we want to be helpful to you as you're making an important decision in your life. Max is right. I believe that, for me, teaching is a profession, and this is part of the reason why you are the best. I'll just go ahead and say it, I think you're probably the best people here, because teaching is the kind of place, the kind of job, I don't know about the other jobs out there, the other things that are happening in other panels, right? But I know that for teaching, it will challenge you to be a better human being. If you are even sort of reflective, then you will actually have to be better as a human being, because you are listening to your students and who they are. So that could mean you need to be more organized. That could mean you need to be less organized, right? That could mean you need to be smilier. That could mean you need to be less smiley. It could mean lots of things. But it's going to mean every day you're going to have to look in the mirror and figure out who the you is that's coming in front of these very important people. And I love that, like, you know, it's so great because like one way that I've been trying to think about it, Aaron's like, it's not about you. And the one that I've been also thinking a lot about it in terms of sometimes it's like, it's all about you because it's not about you, right? Like, it's like you've got to get out of your own way in order to be able to be a great teacher and a servant to young people in the right way. This is important intellectual and spiritual and emotional work. And so for that reason, I think being a teacher has made me a better leader when I became a leader of a small business, a school, right? It's made me a better communicator, and it's made me a better husband and a father, right? Like, so hell yeah, right? Like, just like being, you know, University of Chicago made me better and also more miserable in some important ways. But teaching has done that too. So I would say, yeah.
Can I add?
Yeah,
I'm going to
please
add
do.
something
Jump
for
in.
those folks that are interested in policy. So when I was in college, I was very interested in policy too, and I had this concept of like public policy must mean that they do so much research and they're so intellectual about like the decisions that they're making at a high level. And so I would just say, working in city government, that is not always happening. So if you're like, oh, should I go work for this nonprofit? Should I go to teach? Should I go to grad school? Because I really want to get these like very specific academic disciplines in public policy. If you're thinking about going to like a large urban school district, or, you know, I only have experience with larger urban school districts, but it's very much about like that group of people generating ideas and kind of just trying it out. In New York City, we did do the big studies and we did try and figure out if what we did worked, but that was after we did what we tried. So I would say that, you know, if you want to go into policy, you don't have to go to grad school first to figure out what are the metrics that you're going to create for what you're going to do. So don't be afraid of just kind of jumping in first and then getting the grad degree.
All right, second question.
Well, I will say that you should try to involve yourself as a volunteer in schools if you're working in a policy level. You should read and talk to people who are engaged with the real issues or problems. I mean, one of the things I love about charter schools is that, you know, all of you could eventually, whatever you're doing, serve on the board of a charter school. You could be a lawyer, you could be in finance, you could be an IT person, you could be a real estate developer, or you could be an educator, but you could serve on the board of a charter school. Or, you know, let me stop being a charter school proponent and just say, you could serve on your board of education for a traditional public school district and bring your intelligence and that U of C training that you've got to serve the benefit of kids in our society. And so, although we all said teach, 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 you know, you probably all won't. And that's okay. Like, if you really think you are going to be such a great lawyer, then you should go be a lawyer, but serve in these other ways in the school system, in the school district. I mean, a small thing is just like, if you have children, being a good parent and being involved in your own school, that helps a lot right there. But there are these other ways to get involved.
I think for me, when I was at the Department of Ed, it was really important for me to try and create structure so that I was in the classroom. So, you know, trying to schedule time to go and visit schools. And I think that when you do get to those higher levels, you do have to make time for that and make sure that you are giving yourself the time to reconnect to why you're in this role, why you're doing this. And so for me, it was visiting schools. And I think also, like Jeannie mentioned, you know, if you're not in the position where you can just go drop into a school, it is, again, making those structures for yourself so that you are, you know, visiting in a tutoring capacity or you know, volunteering for a different program. And I think the other thing too is many of you probably will have friends that are teachers, so continuing to talk to them and making sure that you're understanding, you know, what their day-to-day is as well. I think that keeps you connected to why you're in this.
Yeah, for me, it's been a pretty major trade-off in that I don't get to spend much time with students at all anymore. But I do have some friends who are still teaching in the DC metro area, so you go in for career days, this or that. And then also when you're doing a lot of research projects, I go around the country seeing schools that are doing innovative practices for this or for that. So you get to interview teachers and students and administrators to kind of learn how they are doing this, either in the local, more granular level, or then, you know, what district policies did people get out of the way or add to make this more successful to improve student outcome. And then finally, like for myself, I'm still in touch with a lot of my students who are, some of them are now college grads as well. Some of them are parents who are, you know, doing the best they can with everything. And remembering like them when I'm doing whatever it is I'm doing, try and make sure that it would serve their interests or their kids' interests. It's not really a direct connection, I guess. Like I don't see them, but it is easier and it does help to keep them in mind as you're doing your work.
I guess the only thing I wanted to add, it was, and I don't know if you meant this, but you started with, I did NSP, so I sort of have that classroom background. The only thing I would add is just, like, we would never say, oh, I kind of volunteered in a hospital, so I kind of could be a doctor. Like, there's nothing like being
I would say that. I wouldn't say that.
You know, I mean, even I feel like I did student teaching, and even after student teaching, I'm still like, whoa, I'm in charge of my own classroom. So yeah, I would definitely say just keep. NSP is fantastic, definitely, but I don't know if you meant it that way, but please also understand still that, you know, there's nothing like actually doing it yourself. I would say too.
Yeah, and I think too, like, I mean, you're not going to go, one of the things that's going to make this the best panel is that we're also, like, I think this is a good, there's a lot of assumptions that we make about schools and schooling and what it means to be in school, and also a lot of assumptions that we make about low-income kids and you know, kids of color. Like, there's a lot of assumptions that go on, and I think one of the things that probably for some folks feels great about entering into this world or imagining entering into this world is you're going to get to challenge yourself, you know, and ideally challenge yourself in lots of important ways. You know, I think the other piece too, like, we've got this whole industrial model of schooling that we do here where it's like, oh, if we can just, you know, put everybody in, you know, right? Like, what does that mean, you know, in terms of it was successful for us because we all got to go to the University of Chicago, right? Or it was successful in some ways, but what does it mean for the people that it's not successful for? I just think there's a lot of good, like, meaty thinking to do.
If I could,
that didn't answer the question, but yeah.
One thing on this issue of,
yeah,
you know, being successful and challenging yourself and so on, and people feel free to disagree, but when I think back about what was so utterly challenging about school from a very personal level is that, and I'm assuming it's the same true for all of you, you're used to being very successful, like in pretty much everything you do. In high needs public school teaching, you are a failure every day. Even when you're successful, you could have succeeded better and done better. And that's the self-reflexive point that Bill was pointing out. If you have that and you are willing to explore that more and realize that if your lesson plan failed, what did you do that produced that outcome? Not, well, my kids were being crazy or they came in late. No, that's not even a useful line of inquiry. Only worry about what it is that you can do to change that. And for people who are successful in everything their whole lives, that can be almost unbearable. So realizing that failure is the norm, but coming back again to do better each day, that's why they say, like, just showing up matters, because it assumes that you're doing this thing, this step process of kind of self-betterment all the time.
Next question. So, again, Jeannie doesn't get to answer this one because she never taught. Sorry, Jeannie. So, but see, I'm privileging the perspective of people who've taught. See how I did that one there? Candace, would you start, please?
Sure. So I think one thing that is important to remember is that, like, people who go into teaching don't do it for the money. So I think that the people that are are going there are motivated by like the challenge of getting kids to learn and the great feeling you get when one of those students actually, you know, understands the concept. So I think that for those people that are, you know, already there and they're going into it, that kind of compensation piece is not as big of an issue. But I do think from a high level perspective, the compensation of teachers is a problem. And I think unfortunately much of that is tied into the fact that like they are state or city employees, and it's tied to government budgets. But that's then why the charter schools are so important, because then you can elevate the profession of teaching. I think it's a very complicated answer, but I think that the fact that we do have charter schools out there that are figuring out what's the right compensation package for teachers, how do we reward teachers in a different way to really elevate the profession and to demonstrate the kind of respect that teachers and education in general deserve. I think that's what's going to disrupt the market and figure out how we can draw more talent into the teaching pool.
I'll say one thing about being a classroom teacher and then two quick things about the macro policy. And it was my experience that when you're in your classroom, you're very much on an island. So I wasn't interested or concerned about these other perspectives. I was just worried about the kids in front of me, whoever that was at the period. So I didn't find that to be a concern. And then in terms of professionalizing and increasing compensation and so on, a lot of the fights around that, at least in the national discourse, center around this question of teacher evaluation and the idea that in most professional workspaces you'll be evaluated based on outputs. And in some respects, I mean, the outputs you can produce in a child is not wholly contingent upon what it is that you can do. So kind of figuring out how we can do that in a way that is responsible, but nevertheless produces the kind of measures where we can see the teachers that are being the most effective, the most successful, is going to be critical to that. So that's the one thing, the teacher evaluation, which we haven't solved. So if you know how to do that, you know, speak to me after. And the other is on the preparation side of things. You know, we at CAP are working a lot on how to improve teacher preparation programs. By and large, they are not high caliber. They're, in many cases, misaligned with the challenges that teachers face in today's classroom. So increasing that and increasing the readiness teachers feel, I think, will also increase the length of time that they stay, which is going to have a lot of positive impacts also on student outcomes. So I think those are two possible ways to address your problem.
Yeah, I would echo what everyone says. Some more money would help. No, but also because I think particularly if you want more teachers of color, right? You may have a lot of low-income teachers. Like these were the fights I had with my mom. Like, I don't want you to be poor, you know. And then on the other end, if you grew up in a wealthy family, your family might be, I don't want you to be poor, you know. And that, of course, you won't be poor if you're a teacher, but I do think we do need to have a meaningful conversation about raising pay for teachers. And then again, how do we base that pay? Because if we're basing that pay solely off test scores, that might be a sort of like problematic notion to just, you know, oh, this teacher is good because their student had better test scores, or this teacher's bad because their students didn't perform. You know, that sort of dichotomy might not necessarily be productive. Another thing that's also helped for me is I have a lot of my friends are teachers who consider it to be just as intellectually rigorous, and they put that much thought and they put that much effort into it. So for me, once you do become a teacher, wink wink, or you know, if you decide to become a teacher, surround yourself with the people who take it as seriously as you do, and then you start to really adopt that seriousness, and you, even if other people are telling you, making you feel some type of way about it, you start to feel better yourself. And also just as a black person, when I think about the people of color who have been sort of at the front lines of change, you know, they were always the public servants, they were the teachers, they were the social workers, and then as well as lawyers and doctors. So I think that sense of history for me also really just imbues me with that spirit. And it just helps me fight against all that extra noise. You know.
And I would just echo what you said. I think, I mean, that seems totally true to me, right? Like, and I think it sounds like to the rest of the panel, right? Like the teachers as a profession are undervalued. The way that they're treated in terms of the work that they're given and the way they're thought about autonomy, that they're treated in terms of autonomy, in terms of compensation, in terms of respect, it's not right. It's not good, right? And so if that's a fight that matters to you, there's a lot of rock stars out there right now in the country who are fighting that fight, right? Like a good example, there's the New Teacher Project does the Fishman Prize, and this is stuff that we know about because we're all in this world, but have you guys heard of the Fishman Prize? So the New Teacher Project started this thing where they give $25,000 to a teacher, to 5 teachers every year who demonstrate through, of course, lots of different means that they're amazing, right? I think this thing is going to change over time. There's a great book out if you're interested in this idea. It's called Building a Better Teacher by Elizabeth Green.
Yeah.
Great book about this idea of professionalizing and I don't know if the word professionalizing, I just think, recognizing like the amazingness of what teaching is and what it means for our country. I think there's a lot of historical perspective on why we do it why it's done this way, and when you look at a situation, right, like things are a certain way, it's not on accident, right? Like things are a certain way, it keeps people in certain positions in society because it is that way, right? Like, so I think that like what I would say though on this is, and maybe the reason some of us said teach, please teach, we need you to be part of this amazing, important work. We need you. And over the years, people who have been on this panel have joined in this work, and it's become and those folks are out there doing this great work now, and I'm telling you, like when Candace or Aaron or Max or these folks or Jeannie come in, these are very well-respected people. Like they are loved and respected, right? And so I think that like just because you go to a party with an investment banker and they're like snooty, you're gonna be like able to just y'all are you Chicago folks. You'll be able to cut them down quick if you want to. Like you'll be able to say like 10 things that are a lot smarter than them, or you can also like just find your inner peace and dignity and just like not worry about it. However you want to roll with it. But I think that I'm glad we're talking about this because I think it really matters, right? Like I think that like what we're talking about here is about asking people who have a lot of choices in their lives to make a choice that gives other people lots of choices. Can we start with Aaron on this one, since he did UTEP? And okay, I work with UTEP. Please.
Okay, so I did UTEP. So some highlights of doing. I personally I love UTEP. Some highlights of it was, for me, I really did want to. Like I wanted to hurry up and get this like degree. Like I wanted to have a higher education degree in teaching, in education, but I didn't want to spend all my life doing it, So UTEP, you could start at your senior year. So that was a big plus for me, So if the math guy, if you want to teach high school, they have a secondary program for math and science. What's also great about UTEP is really big on self-reflection. And one, that's just like you need that skill for teaching, period. But it was the type of, the program wants to prepare you for urban education, and the way they do that is by actually challenging questions about your identity and getting you to really unpack those things. And in a meaningful way. Like we can all sit in the classroom and talk about, oh, this was racist, this was sexist, but the program actually asks you to place yourself in that. So what does it mean for me as a wealthy white woman from a certain context? What does it mean for me as a black gay male? What does it mean for me to be Latino or come from an immigrant experience? And how is that going to play into my classroom environment? And I just felt like that was tantamount, because when you get into urban school settings, a lot of the things you'll hear and a lot of things that get said and a lot of the beliefs come from a sort of lack of, thank you for smiling, I really appreciate that. Yeah. A lot of what gets said feels like it's coming from a place of not being critical about one's own identity in the teaching setting. So, and then also UTEP is good, I promise you, with like lesson plans and all of that stuff as well, but in terms of that real heavy identity work that I think sustains you in this career, it was excellent for that. So I enjoyed that. And it also really helps you feel like a teacher. You feel like, okay, I'm a teacher. So if you're still combating with all those things. So
I did the New teacher project in so Teaching Fellows in Philadelphia, which sadly at the moment, given to the financial crises in the district, doesn't exist right now. Which I actually do like that they've taken themselves out of the context, given that rather than having some sort of contract with the district to force feed teachers in there when they can't pay for them. So I'm glad about that. But so I only had a month or so of training to get ready, and the best part about that was doing the actual stuff in the summer school. So it's like, here you go, here are your kids, good luck. And I had one of those teacher assistants, whatever, your directors, I'm not sure what they were called, who was mostly interested in getting extra money and didn't really care to do much to help me. So the trial by fire in part was ultimately productive, I think. But for some people, it may not be the best. I was happy that, unlike TFA, I did not need to go back and talk to these administrators very much. I just did my month, and I was on my own, so I was able to rely on the people who were in the cohort with me. And I enjoyed that TNTP really focused on not just new graduates, so there are people from mid-career changing at a rate that was higher than I think than in some other programs. So I had, people who had been in other professional capacities for 20 years who were changing fields, and there's a lot to learn from them as well. I guess that's what I'll say on that.
So I did Teach for America, and similar to the Teaching Fellows, the way they train you is they put you in like a 6-week, it's kind of like a boot camp, where you're living with all those fellow teachers, and you do student teaching, and you also do a lot of lesson planning. And then after that, you do like I think it was like a 2-week orientation where we just learned about like how do you write curriculum, how do you set up your systems and structures in your classroom. And I think that what was most important about that preparation was that they got you on the teacher schedule. Like you were on a bus at like 5:30 or 6 in the morning, and then you didn't get back we stayed in dorms, you didn't get back to the dorm until like 6 or 7. And so that got us on a teacher schedule. It showed you how much time you're putting into it. And then I think the other thing that they gave us was kind of the structures and frameworks in how to think about teaching. They gave you like, this is how you write a lesson plan and things like that too, but there was a lot of like, you have to think about what you did in that classroom that, either didn't work or did work. And so you have to be very reflective, and there's a lot of that in the training. I will say, the other thing that they give you is that network, like you mentioned, that you're relying on these people. These are the people that you're going to have to go to with questions, problems, things like that, support. I will say that I didn't realize how unprepared I was when I got into the classroom that first day, because when you're student teaching, you teach I taught like 45 minutes a day, but when you're a teacher, you're there. Like, you're always on your feet. You don't get to go to the bathroom. You don't get to eat lunch sometimes. Nope. And so I felt unprepared about that. I think that, so Teach for America also supports you throughout the 2 years. So my first year, I was going to school. I was going to graduate school I think it was like once a month on a Saturday. And I was getting my master's in teaching during that time, and then my second year I would go at night, and we would go like just 2 times a night, and we got our master's in teaching. And I think depending on what university you are partnered with in Teach for America, that is either a very robust experience or it's a huge waste of time. And so it does depend region from region. And so for me, I was a secondary math teacher. That was useful because I was getting some pretty clear guidance around like, this is how you teach this concept, or this is how you would do classroom management. But I think that one of the weaknesses in Teach for America, and potentially like in teacher programs in general, is that there are a lot of people placed in special education classrooms, and they do not train you for special education. And that you do get a master's in teaching in special education, but again, depending on the program, it was not really sufficient. I had a friend in Teach for America who was a 3rd grade special education teacher, and he quit after 3 months because he just did not have the support. And so I guess the advice that I would give is that Teach for America does not want their teachers to quit. So you do have to know that you need the support, and you can reach out. There are people on staff that were great special education teachers, and you just have to know that you're really struggling and be able to ask for that help. So Teach for Make kind of gave you the framework and the structures, but there's nothing like being in the classroom that first day.
And I would just kind of step out from the individual programs and just kind of think about, so raise your hand if you're a second year, okay, and raise your hand if you're a third year, okay. Some people didn't raise their hand, confused me. All right, so that's all right. So make a plan. And this is different that would be what I would suggest, is make a plan. And this is different from maybe how you chose a college, but you are going to be highly sought after. You went to UChicago, and the thing that there's lots of things that you offer to people to employers, and one is that you're tough as nails. You don't give up, right? Like, you guys are tough, right? And you waded across the midway and the below zero, and you with your books, and you did your work. You're tough, and you're very intellectually, like, you're hard workers and you're smart, right? So don't just fall into one of these programs. Like, make a choice. So the choices are much better than they used to be. You've got a 3-year program like UTEP. You've got shorter programs like TNTP or TFA, and both of those programs don't believe the hype, right? Like, if you hear, oh, UTEP is all blah, 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 look into it and ask a few people. If you hear, oh, TFA, they don't really teach you, they just throw you in. That's gotten a lot better over the years, right? So the quality of the teacher training programs across the board are better than they used to be. So I would say that's definitely, so the piece, like, raise your hand if you were the #1 driver of your college selection choice, and then raise your hand if you had help from a parent or a counselor, right? So in this, like, think about your next step as really taking the next step so like, here's an example. By March of this year, I want to know 5 programs, and I want to have applied to 3. Just set those goals for yourself, and Nahida knows all the programs, the folks, Candace, the folks at UChicago really know the programs, but I would encourage you, plan it and make it happen. Don't just fall into it. Is that helpful? Yeah. Did you want to?
One thing I would add on, well, a couple things, I guess, to translate it to policy, is that we have not hired people because they quit in the middle of their teaching program.
Yeah.
Like, we decided, I don't want that person here, even though they might be super smart, might be this. I take that, and people I always work with, who have all been teachers as well, take that, like, personally. Like, you have, like, left what I consider, like, my kids. You have abandoned them. Yeah. Therefore, like, I can't hire you. So keep that in mind, not to be scary. Yeah. And then the other is, like, to pick up on what Erin was saying, and then also, since we've already pulled from the keynote, when she was saying about empathy and getting to know the people or her employee from the Congo, I think that is, like, half of it, because you must know your privilege, and then you must, looking at this room, like, we need to know our privilege, and then also considering that we're all U of C people, we need to really know our privilege. And then also, you have to get past the idea that you can somehow learn somebody else's life and their experience. Mm-hmm. As much time as you can spend doing that, once you achieve, like, you achieve your wisdom, which is realizing you can't, and you cannot voice their experience, you cannot be, truthfully their representative as, like, a white male working in a civil rights organization. I had to learn and master that, which a lot of it is being quiet. A lot of it is deferring, letting people who know what they're talking about listen to their ideas, their perspectives, and then use those ideas as you go and lobby the Hill. So, like, understanding that is critical. You will not understand what it is to be, black child in Northern Philadelphia. You can't, but you can do your best. Once you've done all your work, you'll realize that you can't, and you'll arrive at that point, I think. It makes you a lot more productive as a teacher and everything else.
Man, this is deep. Jeannie, how you doing? So
Good.
I totally, like, strong-armed you on the teacher thing. But but thank you for being so kind about it. And Jeannie and I have been friends a long time. But so if I could throw out to you, like, advice, right? Like, whether it's like, what's a piece of advice, and then maybe we'll work back, like, a piece of advice to folks in this stage in their lives.
Well, I was going to comment on the question about, pay for teachers.
Mm-hmm.
First, you said, well, you could go make $1 million doing something else, or darn, you could be a teacher. You know, it's actually not that many people who are making $1 million. So that's number one, is that your parents or other people might imply that there are all these $1 million jobs out there, and then there's scruffy teachers. But, you know, I mean, you can have a job at $45,000, you can have a job at $75,000, you can have a job at $100,000, you know. There's not a lot of people in America making $300,000. I mean, if you want to do that, you're going to have to go get some kind of specialty degree. So just wanted to kind of put things in perspective there. The other thing is, if you care about teachers' salaries, you know, run for office. We all said here that government controls those salaries, and if you someday are an elected official, maybe you can do more in that way to change the pay for teachers. So we need supporters of education in different places in the world.
I guess my one piece of advice, if I'm only giving one piece of advice, is for you to draw.
Just one more than one? Let's go. You want three?
I have a lot of advice I want to give. Is to draw on this network of people in this room, and do that by talking to each other. Do it by talking to alumni that are in the field or not in the field, and you know, I think doing informational interviews and just kind of getting to know and making those connections is really important, because down the line, somebody's gonna go, well, I talked to that person and they were really, really smart. Well, I'm looking for somebody to do this job now, and they might think of you. I think that when I was in college, I didn't realize that when you apply for a job, like usually people already know who they're gonna hire for that job. And so it's important to get in front of people before there's a job on the table. And so, you know, keep those networks, and even keep those networks with people that are not in the field that you're interested in. The reason that I'm in the role that I am in now is because I have a friend from Chicago who works in the music industry, and his boss happens to be on the board of this charter organization. And so he's totally not in education, but he was the one that got me this job. So definitely make sure that you stay in touch with everybody in this room, stay in touch with other alumni. We all want to help you, and we all want to see you succeed. So make sure you draw from the network too.
Again, if there's only one piece of advice.
We can open it up. And I'm not being straight. Like, give more. Do you need to give another one? Jump in there. Like, you can give more than one piece of advice. It's all good.
And also, just as an aside, like, I know we didn't get to talk too much about like policy strictly. So if people are interested in those sort of national policy stuff, especially given that ESEA is like coming up in the next week or two, is being reauthorized. I spent all my time in the Hill. If people want to have questions about that, I can talk about it at another point. But to build on a networking thing, it's not principally, at least in DC, it's not only about getting a job. Right? Once you get that first job, you're pretty much set to get the next one. I think the networking piece has been most successful for me because it makes you better at your job, because then certain people get to know certain things, and knowledge truly, like, as cliche as it is, especially in DC and in the policy space, is absolutely power. And if you don't know what's happening, what conversations are happening, what's coming up, you'll be caught unaware. You won't. So that network helps you be in the know and take seriously the confidentiality kind of points. You know, a TFA person was super mad at me for not sharing a bill that Congressman Miller at the time, the ranking member on the House Ed and Workforce Committee, had passed around. I'm not going to be that person who shares that. So, and it goes on and on and on. Don't take seriously that, because then you'll get to know more, and you'll be better at your job, which then makes you more likely to be hired at the next one at a higher level, and so on.
I can say, well, I'll do two pieces of it. One, this is my personal bias. I say, if you're white, take a class about race. If you're a male, take a class about women. If you're straight, take a class about LGBTQ people. Just one, because it increases your capacity for empathy, but it also teaches you to think about some systems and structures and stuff in the society, if you haven't done so already. So, and take more if you want to. I would say, because I am, so like I said, I just graduated 2014, so I'm making that transition into like a young professional, young adult, and I still sort of feel weird. Like I still don't feel like I'm legit yet. What I would say too is in college, what I didn't appreciate is that you really do have so much time. Like it may not feel like you do, but you really do. Like you really have so much time. And it's just like, and I would say like start trying to, especially if you're like in your third year, getting ready for it, start trying to break out of those habits that become like normalized and accepted in college, like being a procrastinator or not following up, or like maybe not doing all the readings and then just trying to come into, you know, the class and just talk really well. You know, I would say start trying to break that now so that the transition to the professional environment is a little more smooth, and you can really just be about your business when you start. Because I think that was a little bit difficult for me, is because not like the school I'm in, the principal has really, really high expectations. And so yes, being smart, being able to speak well and doing a lot of things in college, that got me in the door. But now it's about like, okay, well, what are you doing? What have you actually done? Like, are you defining yourself by, like, so yes, we all went to U of C, but start thinking about what have I actually done? What have I actually accomplished? Where has my leadership been? Because you don't want to just completely define yourself by your affiliations, because at some point you also have to be held accountable for like your talent. And you are talented, so you know, it won't be a hard question to answer. But I think just start trying to break that now, so that it won't be like, oh my God, I have to wake up before 8 o'clock today, you know? So that's one thing I would say.
And so, that's really good. You know, just in terms of thinking about like making sure that you have invested the time to do things that actually matter, right? And you can do that now in the next couple of years, right? And that actually helps you get the position you want, right? Like you can lead an organization. You can do those things now. One thing I would throw out there that seems to be always helpful with UChicago folks is, you know, that thing, and it's sort of a way that to restate what the other folks said, but you know that thing that we all do when you're coming from a class and you're coming from like across the quad and you see someone else coming like from Regenstein and you're heading kind of towards Reagan, and you see them coming and you had a class with them, right? And you get like right close to them and then you look away and then you just go, where are you going, right? You know that thing? You guys do that? Oh, we used to do that all the time. You know, or you know the joke about how can you tell a socially advanced UChicago student from a not socially advanced UChicago student? You know this one? A socially advanced or non-socially advanced UChicago student looks at their shoes when they're talking to you, but a socially advanced UChicago student looks at your shoes. Right? Thanks for helping me. So you know, so I would say every year, like I've offered, come see the schools, see the school where I'm principal, come see the schools where I'm a senior director now, and people actually take me up on it. It's really smart. And I would say that all these folks, our emails are in the book for a reason, and so it really is okay to reach out. And I would say on the other piece of it is that I'd like to link those two a little bit, and maybe this is like a chance to think about, what are you afraid of? Because like I know, like when I was sitting in your chair, I wouldn't have reached out to folks because I was afraid to talk to them. They're scary professionals. And I think that was for my own reasons, and I figured that out, right? And so I think like it's a good time now to ask yourself, what are you afraid of? Because it really is true that you are very talented and very lucky. Like you are very lucky, and you have some really important gifts, like really important. And so like this is an important time to think about what's blocking you from sharing those gifts, because we need them.
Can I add one?
Yeah, you can give as many pieces of advice as you want. I'm not like the advice police over here.
I have an advertising plug about reaching out. So for the last 4 years, the New York City Department of Education has hosted Metcalf internships. I know that many of you have applied that are in this room. And so continue to look out for opportunities like that. I hired my Metcalf intern from 2 years ago, and he was amazing. You guys all are amazing. And in my new role, thanks to Nahida's help, I'll be offering a Metcalf internship as well. So if you're interested in startups, if you're interested in school ops, apply for that internship. The posting should be going up later this month. So would love to have any one of you.
I mean, I could jump in. I think ideally, I wish that we would study the type of learners students are and then choose schools and classrooms based on the type of learners they are. Because there are just some kids, like, to be able to kind of, I mean, even think about the fact that, like, in my classroom, kids aren't expected to come in and sit down for, like, 6 hours. For us to do that now as adults, we would be climbing up the walls, you know? And so I just think I would love if, you know, there were, like, learner profiles for, like, each student, and then they got to pick the school based off what was the best way that they learned, so that they wouldn't have to sit down if they were a student who didn't like to sit down. So that's something quick that has popped in my head.
God. I'll just ground it in the realm of we could easily achieve this if we had political will and that sort of thing, which is I wish kids felt like they were actually safe in schools and were not being forced out and expelled and arrested and all these other things, beginning as early as pre-K. If you're, and you know, so I think that's something we could do quite easily. Some states have done that. I think there's one that has gotten rid of exclusionary discipline on the whole. And Maryland and Baltimore has done good things along that as well. But pretty much everybody else does not. And corporal punishment, for instance, is illegal in many states still. So I would like classrooms that didn't do those things. I'll just start there.
I think for me, education is all about choice. So I would want that every student that we are educating feels like when they leave our system, that they have the choice to do whatever they wanted to do in their lives. And I think that comes through rigorous instruction and getting them the content knowledge that they need, but also the skills for them to feel successful in anything that they want to do. And so if we can get classrooms that provide all of those skills so that when a student comes out, they can choose whatever they want to do and be successful at that I think that's a great outcome.
I think that one thing that's really interesting to think about is the difference between what urban kids can have and what rural kids can have. And some people say technology could be much more helpful even to rural kids. And so in terms of like what might be achievable, I'm not a big fan of 100% virtual education schools, but I think schools that provide more blended learning opportunities for virtual learning to children, especially in rural environments, because like here in Chicago, there's a mantra that we often say, like there are kids that live in Englewood that have never seen the Art Institute, and that is absolutely true. But there are a lot of wealthy people here in Chicago that will, when they find that out, will go rent a bus and get a lot of kids down there. But if you live in Keokuk, Iowa, you ain't never going to the Art Institute. And that's kind of something to think about. How can we solve that dilemma for rural children?
Intellectually challenging and hilarious. That's what I want out of a classroom. Like super hilarious, like really funny. Personally.
Do we have like, I think we need to wrap up. So we did advice.
Like one valuable thing. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But like, what was the most valuable thing that we got from our Chicago experience?
Oh yeah, you want to do that? You guys want that one?
Sorry.
Yeah, most valuable thing from Chicago experience. Okay, we'll trade you that one for 3 people to stand up right now and give us a takeaway from this panel.
So 3 people, and it can't be all white guys, because like, please. Is that weird to do it that way, or should I do it the other way? No, I don't know. Aaron's going to help me on this. 3 people, quick, stand up. One takeaway from this. Quick. 1, we got 1, we need 2 more.
This is
stand
assessment.
Up. Yeah, this is easy. Yeah, this is assessment. 2 more. Quick, stand up, be brave. 2, 3, thank you. Start in the back, 1 takeaway. And say your name, please.
Empathy?
Yeah. You just crushed it. Thank you, Kirsha.
I'm Corinne, and I learned about how important the leadership is.
Huh.
I'm Jane. I think you convinced me to want to be an elementary school teacher or middle school.
What? All right, so now, in exchange, thank you all very much, we will give you one thing that, and I'll just start off, here's the advantage you have over the people who are gonna wanna do the jobs that you wanna do. You will never give up. They will all quit because they are quitters, and you will never give up because you will never give up. Like, they might be smarter than you, they might be like better looking, whatever. They might have gone to like a cooler school and a fun, but you will never give up. And your inability to give up means that you will win.
Mine isn't as funny, but I think UChicago just really cultivates your ability to just ask good questions. And I know that's so stereotypical, but I just really feel like it's just everyone would be like, why is that chair the color? That chair should be blue. And then there's always a UChicago person that goes, maybe we don't need that chair, you know? and that's, I mean, even just the question you asked, you know, it's such a powerful question. Like, what is your vision? You know, what do you want to see? You know, and I think UChicago really allows us, it just teaches us to ask really powerful questions. And I think that's just an amazing personal skill and a great career skill. And I love that. I feel like that was cultivated at USC.
I mean, yes, I would agree with that. And then, at least for me personally, like, since my focus was on like African American fiction, learning about things that you have nothing, like, you just, is not your experience, and made me, well, was very useful in everything I've done, as it relate to any other person that is not a white male, thinking about their experience and being able to ask appropriate questions, or just not ask any questions, but just, you know, be quiet. It's something that takes a little while to learn.
I think for me, and I didn't realize this until I was way out of college, I think the most useful thing that I got out of the University of Chicago is that you are all amazing project planners and project managers, because you are juggling all of these really rigorous classes, you are so involved, and many of you are working jobs, and that takes a lot of project management of your schedule and knowing you know, your priorities and things like that. And so I would just, you know, you talk about like, oh, maybe it's not like such a practical degree, but the experience that you're getting and managing to get to that degree is really practical. And so just really draw on the skills that I think you've probably learned them yourselves when you're managing all of that, and take that to your job, because we need a lot of good project managers out there. Teachers are the ultimate project managers.
I would say being, this is really nerdy, but being an analytical reader, in the sense that understanding that something written, it came out of someone's head. So why do they put that in the prologue? Why is that the last chapter? Why are the sentences arranged thus? And so anything you ever read then, whether it's a politician's speech about why teachers are paid just fine, or a law forbidding certain things in our country, it allows you to take apart the written word, which can seem sometimes sacrosanct, and figure out what was the motivation behind it. And that intellectual exercise is like useful all your life.
Well, thank you to our amazing panelists, and thank you all for coming, and thank you to Nahida and Candace for always being supportive. So thank you.